This week on a lively experiment, primary day is in the rearview mirror. Now it's on to the November elections. Plus, the first and potentially only debate between Donald Trump and Kamala Harris.
A lively experiment is generously underwritten by.
Hi, I'm John Hazen White Jr. For over 30 years, A Lively Experiment has provided insight and analysis of the political issues that face Rhode Islanders. I'm a proud supporter of this great program and Rhode Island PBS.
Joining us on the panel, political contributor Don Roach, Sue Cienki, National Committeewoman for the Rhode Island Republican Party, and Bob Walsh, former executive director of the National Education Association of Rhode Island. Hello and welcome to Lively. It is great to be back with you again this week. We will have a breakdown of the presidential debate a little later, but first, closer to home, voters across Rhode Island went to the polls to decide more than a dozen General Assembly primary races. The turnout statewide was just over 10%. And the race that got the most attention, a rare Republican primary for mayor of Cranston. So let's begin with the unofficial mayor of Cranston here. Don, you've been a long time involved in city politics. I think what surprised me and maybe some others was the margin of victory for Mayor Hopkins. He was running against State Representative Barbara Ann Fenton-Fung, beat her by 18 points.
Yeah, I don't know if the margin is as surprising as it would be for me a few months ago, just because the race became so contentious. And Mayor Hopkins has been in the city for years. He's very well known, his family's well known, and Mike Farina tried a similar strategy against him a few years ago, and it didn't work, and it also didn't work with Fenton-Fung. It became more about corruption and less about like the issues that are faced in Cranstonians, and that's where I think she may have gone awry.
Yeah, I think it became a nasty campaign on her part. I think that Ken held back a little. He's very well liked. He's very popular. I think it was a colossal error on her point to even run against an incumbent mayor that's very well liked. There was no upside to her running at all. She was in a seat that she could have stayed in, but then people started looking at her record. What did she vote for when she was in the General Assembly? And it was not Republican ideals. It was more on the left liberal side, her voting record. So I think that exposed what she was actually all about, and it was just a colossal error on her
and in
fault.
that race against Mattiello, when she picked him off, I mean, that was really kind of the highlight at that point. There really wasn't a track record to look at.
Right.
You could argue without having issues, put her on your neck.
Right, and with the Speaker Mattiello, I mean, you had Steve Frias had run against him twice, and he was under investigation. So there was a lot of things. He wasn't going to survive, no matter. He was very weakened by the time he went up for that election. So anybody could have beaten him at that point. But she did have a track record. I think it was a mistake. I think now for both of the Fungs, I think, the telephone call is rung and it's the private sector is answering. Maybe they need to get out of politics for a while.
Since I am the only Democrat on the panel, I just sit back and watch Republican primaries, especially when they're divisive. When the Republican elephants fight, the Republican grass gets trampled.
You really haven't gotten to see that for a while.
We haven't gotten to see that.
Jim Bennett, Don Kucheri, it's been a long time,
there was
right?
one, and Steve Laffey had a Republican opponent, and the mayor's always way back when, and occasionally there are Republican primaries, but they're few and far between. I think it helps Robert Ferry, who was the Democratic candidate for mayor in Cranston, because I think there were enough hard feelings in the race. Barbara Ann Fenton-Fung on election night did not endorse Mayor Hopkins. I'm sure she's thinking long and hard about whether she can, given some of the issues that she raised, the car thing and all of that are still unanswered. And they have to be answered. I mean, you can say they're political attacks, but the press deserves and the public deserves real answers to those questions wherever they may lead. And Robert Ferry, who had been a Republican, to get elected to the council citywide was a big vote getter. I'm giving him some advice to the extent I advise a lot of Democrats. My advice during the primary is stay out of it. Let them pick on each other. And But the real advice for most municipal positions, there's not a Democratic or a Republican way to run a city. You listen to the people, you listen closely to what they have to say, and you respond. And you don't play favorites. If somebody needs their sidewalk repaired or their road plowed, or basic municipal services, you have to be responsive, whether they have your sign on the lawn or someone else's sign on the lawn. And those are easy.
Right,
Those
you
are
represent everyone.
I've,
And I think
I've always thought that local races should be nonpartisan.
Yeah,
whether
and I
they
think
ever
that
will be
Ken
or
has
not.
done a good job. There aren't a lot of complaints about how the city has been run, so I think he's got the lead going into the general election. And you're right, Bob Ferry used to be a Republican, and
So there'll be questions about
So-
We're
Well,
glad to have him. We always are recruiting.
you can have him, you can have Dick and Liz Cheney too, take them.
We'll get to that later.
Wow, I never thought I'd hear that. But okay.
I want Don.
I think Mayor Hopkins has, he's run the city the way I would have expected him to run the city in terms of he's like a people's mayor.
Right.
Have there been instances or do I have questions about some of his decisions? Yes. Any reasonable person would. But the thing about Mayor Hopkins, he has the city's best interests in mind. And I know Bob well as well, and Bob also has the
Bob
best
Ferry.
interests. Yeah, Bob Ferry, the city's interests in mind as well. However, I don't think this primary is going to hurt Mayor Hopkins in the general election. Like I said, we had another contentious battle several years ago, and Mayor Hopkins won handily, and I think he's going to be a very difficult candidate to beat come November.
Just as an aside, I don't know ultimately what Barbara Ann Fenton Funk's going to do, but I find it kind of refreshing that you don't immediately endorse. You rip each other apart, and then you say, oh, I'm going to support this person who I've been. So ultimately, she may be, but I think it's a little disingenuous.
Well,
That's
I think
just-
given the nature of that race, that's true. If this is a race
But I mean,
where
like Nikki
if it's-
Haley to go national.
Yeah,
I mean,
if it's an open seat race and we both want, well, you can be a Democrat for this scenario. We're both running
Never.
for an open seat. We're not attacking each other. We just have a different position on the issues. And then you say, all right, I
Or
support
you
the-
could be a
But it
Republican
would have
in
been
that
very
scenario.
hard. Okay, sure. All right. Right, because
Well,
they
I
need
think,
recruits.
when you're in politics, you can't take anything personally. You have to have an alligator skin. And if you stick to the policies, what are your policies? Are they moving the city forward? That's fair game. I think when you make the attacks personal, I think that's when you
It's a
cross
harder.
the line. It's
Now,
a harder thing to
This
to
is
get
going
to.
to be an interesting race, also because it's in a presidential election year, and I'm expecting a fairly sizable Democratic turnout statewide and in Cranston, and I think that the Harris team for president is going to prevail in Cranston, and that turnout could help Robert Ferry in the mayor's
Any
race.
other races statewide that you were looking at? The Senate president prevailed third time against Lenny Seo. There were some local races. What were you looking
Well,
at?
I think when you look at the races, because there were several Democratic primaries, the power of incumbency. There was only one incumbent that actually lost,
Yeah,
and
Ed
that was
Cardillo
Ed Cardillo.
from Johnson.
Yeah,
and
Kelsey
he lost.
Coletta in a rematch.
Right,
Yeah,
right.
and he lost to someone that's progressive. Is that going to play well in Johnston? I don't know. I don't think so. I think Johnston is a much more conservative Democratic area. And if you look at how Republicans have actually done in Johnston, statewide, they've won that seat. I mean, President Trump did win in Johnston in 2016 and 2020. So I think it's going to be an interesting race to see. There are a couple open seats. You have, Senator Lombardo and Lombardi, who both left. So those are open seats. We're looking at Jen Caputi in the Senate district in Cranston. I think she's got a good shot there. And also Karen Gorman, who's running up in Johnston, because it is a Republican-leaning
Yeah, that's a
seat.
tough one for you
seat.
guys to take
and
with that candidate.
I just want to look at people and say, are you happy with the way things are being run in Rhode Island? I mean, I can't believe
Well,
when we talk
apparently
about
10 out of the 11, 9 out of the 10 races they said yes because they stayed with the incumbent.
Well, they stay with the incumbent, but again, low voter turnout. I mean, you look at in District 9 up in Providence, and the representative Enrique is saying, wow, I won, thank you. Well, 606 people came out to vote. That's 4% of the electorate. There are 14,000 residents there.
But you understand what turnout's likely to be, and you managed to your number, and he did a great job. He's a great organizer.
Well,
He's a great
he
organizer.
worked, and he had two people running against him, Javier Sanchez and Anastasia. jump back in.
Well, no, Sanchez was,
Santos Javier.
Santos.
Yeah, yeah.
Right. Santos
Santos
Javier
was
and
the-
Anastasia. What
Right.
else were you looking at?
Sorry. One thing that I was thinking about was just the low voter turnout. I think people are really focused on the presidential race, really. I don't think they're, to Sue's point, I don't think people in Rhode Island are, at least with the General Assembly, are as upset, let's say, as they have been in the past. I think people are very focused on who's going to be the next president of the United States, because that is definitely going to have an impact on our daily lives. So I think that's probably the cause for the low voter turnout. I do want to take issue with something Sue said about Fenton Fung, in terms of Fenton Fung is your prototypical Republican. How she was stylized as potentially more moderate with some of the things she was accused of voting for is just interesting to me, because she has always been pretty steadfast in her principles and values. And I think one thing she's been, like her or not, has been, she is who she is. And she didn't endorse Mayor Hopkins. And I think that was the right thing for her to do, to take a second, reflect, pause, and decide what to do later. But I definitely don't think that in her time as a General Assembly person, she's shifted to the left.
Final thought on
Well,
that?
I think that she has. She was the only Republican who did not vote for the Republican minority leader to be Speaker of the House. She went and voted for the Democrat, who doesn't need her vote. She voted for the Green New Deal in Rhode Island. She voted to give tuition to illegals. So those are not Republican values.
And so in a Republican primary, that's going to be an
in a
issue.
Republican primary,
In a
that's gonna
general
hurt her.
election, it might be
In a general
different.
election, it might not hurt her.
Quickly, final thought.
Yeah, I would just say, doesn't that maybe reflect that she's willing to work with people across the aisle, which I think we need more of in our state, not less.
Okay.
Well, come on over to the Robert Ferry team, all you Barbara and Fenton Fung people.
There we go.
There are a few other races, quickly, because I
Yeah.
know you want to move on. Mayor's race in Woonsocket.
John Ward.
John Ward and the
Chris
incumbent
Beauchamp,
now,
yeah.
Chris Beauchamp, who inherited the seat, so to speak. That round two will be interesting. And of course, the Democratic primary for Josh Miller's seat was big turnout and very close race that Lamas Vargas won, but that was Darrell Brown came very close, and everybody acquitted themselves well in that race. So there was, and that had big turnout. Everybody worked hard on it. They got their people out to the polls. So there are places where you work the race, you realize what your potential vote is, and you get them out. So, commendations to everyone involved in those races for turning folks out. And some start with a head of steam, and then people realize it might not work out, and then they attenuate. Val Lawson in East Providence had a primary challenger. She won 3-1.
Okay. A lot going on, as usual, with the Washington Bridge. Many developments over the last couple of weeks since we were last with you. So let's begin with the state. There was a lot of not protestation, but the DOT took issue with people saying, well, we're worried about the weight now on the eastbound side because you're putting 6 lanes of traffic on. Well, it turns out some engineers at DOT were a little concerned about that last April. We're beginning to find out.
Shocking that you're doubling the weight now on the Washington Bridge, and you have to worry about it. This has been going on for more than 12 years. Where's the accountability? That there is no accountability for the engineers saying that we have an issue with this bridge, they're not maintaining it, and it's just a farce that now they're going with these construction companies that they're suing. So what's the ultimate result of that? The ultimate result is the bids are going to come in way higher than they should, because those companies want to cover the costs when they get sued by the state. So it was great to see that Peter Nerona, during the lawsuit, is going to make all that public documents available so everybody can see where it goes. But ultimately, the taxpayers are going to be, again, holding the bag for government incompetence.
I know you have Governor McKee's ear. He seems to be thinking everything's going great. We're moving toward an RFP. We had a little bit of a hiccup, but I wonder if there's a disconnect between what the governor thinks and what the rest of the state thinks.
I wouldn't say he thinks everything's going great. I think he's in the lousy position of trying to be a cheerleader for people still going to businesses and crossing that bridge every day while dealing with the incredibly frustrating situation that Sue just outlined. We are suing everybody and anybody who is involved in building bridges at the same time we're trying to build a new one. I don't think, and again, I'm partisan on this, I don't think there's enough credit for 2 things that happened. Nobody died. We closed the bridge.
Whoa, that's a low.
We closed the bridge. Hold on.
Wait.
We closed the bridge.
Nobody died.
Before
Yay.
it fell down. And had there been a catastrophic failure of this bridge, had it collapsed, even without a person on it, and it had fallen south versus north, because you don't know which way these things are going to fall, it would have taken out that other bridge.
Are you going to
and we
recommend
would
that as
have
a
no
plank in the
bridge.
governor's
Yeah.
platform?
No,
That's
because
great.
you can't
Nobody
talk
died.
about it, because it's a long explanation.
Dan McKee, nobody died.
Yeah, but it is the truth of it. This is a phenomenal inconvenience for a significant portion of the state of Rhode Island, but it wasn't a disaster, and either in loss of life or in loss of infrastructure on the other side. And I do have the concern when you double the weight on what's there, it's gonna shorten the useful life of it, and there will be accountability. Somebody messed this up, and it was much further back in time than when Dan McKee became governor.
When I run for office again, I'm hiring Bob as a consultant for my image, for sure. Because to me, this is a colossal disaster and continues to be a disaster. You got residents who are complaining about the noise at night.
Right, because they're taking down the old bridge,
Right.
and they didn't give them any heads up that it was coming.
No.
It's just a pile driver.
And they're not
Which they were
answering.
required to do.
They're not answering their
Yes.
phone calls, and it's just like we're taking a disastrous situation. Sorry, Bob, and
making
compounding
worse.
it.
And making it worse.
And why would that give anybody any
Confidence.
Yeah, exactly.
confidence in moving forward.
We're gonna, things are gonna do better. So to me, I would say, to just add to Bob's point, nobody died. Yet.
Yeah, nobody died yet.
And so how can Rhode Islanders be confident? I just don't think they can. So I don't think governor can take any credit for anything.
Well, and we're paying a $3 million bonus, speed bonus, to take the bridge down when we don't even have an RFP yet.
Yeah, if we had $1 billion, we would already be building a new bridge on the other side, but we don't, because that's the way to do it. Ignore the one that we have to take down and start building
Yeah, but
immediately
you know
on
the old
side.
Fram.
But it would cost twice as much.
You know the old Fram commercial, pay me now, pay me later. And there were reports that said, we all know this is out in the public, reports that said we could have fixed that bridge or at least not gotten to where we were now, $8, $10, $20 million. Now we're looking at $5, $6, $7.
You know,
10 years ago,
and eventually,
15 years
right,
ago.
okay, and that was well before this guy.
I
was
get
in
that,
office.
but I mean,
Right, and
yeah,
you're right.
but the people
You know,
at DOT,
this is
nobody
hot
has lost a
potato.
paycheck.
Nobody's
been
right.
suspended.
Well,
nobody's lost
by the
a
way,
job.
that's an issue I hope comes up in the accountability study, and this is again prior administration.
We're never going to see the accountability study.
Why do we continue to outsource jobs from DOT to the outside world so that there isn't going to be accountability? I mean, there was a whole, and that wasn't the only department where we outsourced a lot of work, and now we're paying for it.
Well, interesting enough, today the governor is having a press conference for a $53 million green bond to build more offshore wind turbines. And I'm thinking, fix the bridge. If you want $53 million from the public on the November ballot, fix the bridge that is really going to have a daily impact on all Rhode
Government
Islanders.
doesn't stop in all other categories because we're working on
They
one
should
category.
stop on that category because it's
Well,
useless.
you don't like-
I
you
don't
don't
like
like
the
the
wind
issue. You don't
turbines.
like the wind-
It is killing
I like the
marine
wind
life.
turbines. Go with
Yeah,
wind.
good, because you don't like whales.
All right, we're going to do a whole other show on the wind turbines. Let's focus.
Yeah, but I am focused because
I
they're
like the
asking
waves.
people for money for, energy production, and you've got a bridge. Now look what happened this morning. There was an accident on I-95. I mean, that happens on a daily basis, but because you only have one side of the bridge, it exacerbates the problem.
But what would you do differently? How would you build it faster? How would you build a new bridge faster? How would you tear down the existing bridge faster, given all the concerns of the noise and damage to the public?
I think
Come
they've
up
got
with a better idea.
I think they've got a PR problem in not communicating well enough. I think if you tell people, like just taking down the bridge, you've got to tell people what you're doing. And it seems as if he's kind of lost. I mean, I don't know
And I
what's going to
think-
happen in 2026. Is he going to run for re-election?
Yes.
Yeah, okay, he runs
Well,
for
it's
re-election.
2024.
And his theme
started
is going to
like
be, but it's going to impact what's going to
Last
happen.
30 seconds on this.
that it hasn't cost anyone's job is an error. Like
Right.
if you do something, if you are the person in charge when this happened, we're not saying it's McKee's fault that the bridge faltered, but there are people that should be held accountable and should have been held accountable by now. And why isn't that happening? So again, there's just no confidence.
We're
in,
suing like 13 different companies to figure out where the liability is.
But
Those are the
interesting-
companies, but that's
interesting
like-
how it was even found
Within
out.
the administration,
it was a
there
young
are people-
engineer that didn't work for the DOT. So it was found out by an outside agency.
Because they outsource so many jobs.
Yeah, but they outsourced it, and it was a young engineer that said, "You got a problem."
Why
wanna
wasn't there an old engineer 10 years ago
Right.
that told
Well,
us about
why
this?
wasn't there somebody from DOT saying, "Hey, we
Because
got a
they got rid of
problem
a lot
here."
of those
All
jobs.
right, I want to save time for the presidential debate. Just remember, nobody died. Keep that in mind.
Nobody died. That's
Yet.
going to be the theme. Yes.
Yes.
Thank you, Don.
Yeah, exactly. He's
Nobody died
he's
yet.
amending that. Okay. If you watched the debate, and all four of us did, you were among the 67 million who actually tuned in for the first and potentially only debate between former President Trump and Vice President Kamala Harris. Let's just get a quick lightning round about. I mean, we can get into it, but we only have 4 or 5 minutes to do this. Initial thoughts about.
No notes. It was mission accomplished for Vice President Harris and her debate performance. As you know, I've done debate prep with candidates, at the local and state level for 30 years, and she achieved all her goals. We saw a future president on that stage, which was goal number one, and even beyond that, he took the bait on everything. She played right up against him, and he followed her lead down a lot of rabbit holes he never should have done.
I think she said a lot, no substance with confidence. And I think you're right. I think he fell for some bait, and he had a lot of missed opportunities, I think. She was, of course, very well prepared. She was well prepared with standard answers, but no substance with a lot of confidence. And that's a low bar. She had a low bar. I think everybody was watching to see how many gaffes that she had, and the fact that she was very well rehearsed. Shocked people, and that's a low bar for president.
The fact that
Nobody
he said that
died.
people are eating
Nobody
cats
died.
and dogs.
Yeah.
Your guy, who was president of the United States,
Guess
said
what?
that people are
Guess
eating
what?
cats and dogs.
And that's a cultural thing. People do that.
All right.
Yeah.
I'm defending the bridge. She's defending eating cats and dogs.
All right.
No, that's
Let
a
me
cultural
get
thing.
Yeah,
I
no,
mean,
thoughts?
whether it happened
I
or
think
not, people
this-
do that.
The simple answer is she crushed him in the debate. That's the simple answer. And I think I saw Trump doesn't want to have another debate, which is a good strategic move because she would beat him again in another debate. And she took the approach that was the right approach against someone who is, for me, a fear monger, as I believe Donald Trump is you just stay above the fray and you make the other person look like the lunatic. And she did that very effectively. Still, I think the big thing that I found from coming from the debate is that 14% of the people are reconsidering their vote. That's a big number in a very tight race. It doesn't seem like a big number, but in a really tight race, that's big. And Trump can't afford to have another debate performance like that, where you have someone like Sue, former, Republican chairwoman of the party, really doing her best job to spin it in the debate in a good way when you really can't because his performance against her was that bad, in my opinion.
No, I think that they should have another debate. I would like to see her do more interviews. I think it's such a short.
I think that's going to happen.
Yeah, I think it's such a
I think she
shortened-
knows that has to happen.
It's such a shortened election cycle for her. And when she ran in 2020, she was out early because people saw her as someone very far left. And I think she's got to really identify and stop stealing her policies from President
You know what's
Trump.
going to get him to debate? Every day she's going to go, Donald Trump is afraid to debate
no,
me.
I think that he
He's
should.
And the chicken things.
Right.
Her media team is really like, they're not Biden's media team. These people are like really going after him, and that's going to trigger him into another debate.
Yeah, I
don't
think-
know
I
if
think
he'll
he
do
has
it.
to.
I think he should.
I think he
but
should.
I don't know if he can control himself again. As much as he is hard to. I imagine he is hard to prepare for debate. As much as if I'm preparing him for debate, if you're running, either one of you or the Republican nominee for president, I say, look, these are the two issues that play well with the undecided voters in the 7 states you need. And these are the two issues they're going to use. So you're going to de-emphasize my issues and play up your issues. Not talk about cats and dogs, not talk about how many people were in attendance at a rally, but he can't help himself because his ego By the rules that we played with, his debate
he's-
performance was so bad he should drop out.
He's not a politician, and it's so funny because I was
He's not a
getting,
politician. He's been.
he's a
Please.
Yeah, but he was president. He was president.
He's not what I would say is a typical
career
politician.
politician.
He's not a career
No.
politician. And it's interesting, I was getting text messages from people that were saying she's not answering the question. And I said, that's good debate prep.
Yes, that's good debate prep.
You answer the question that you want, and that's what she's
can
doing.
be not a
First question.
politician and
Yeah.
succeeded. But Sunland was not
So
a
the
politician.
first question
and
was,
did
are
his
you
thing.
better off than you were 4 years ago?
And she
just
didn't
went
answer
right
that question
off the
because
line.
that's
No, she
it.
went to-
Out of the past 16 years, right, presidents, 16 years, 12 of those have been Democratic presidents, and there's only 4 that we've had peace and prosperity.
It's
that was during
dangerous
Trump.
with-
That's what he should have focused in on. Are you better off now than you were 4 years ago?
All right, we
And the
gotta
answer
get-
is no.
With more than 7 weeks to go, we won't be back on before the election.
Oh, I think we should be.
We should be.
Yeah, but
309
counterpoint.
electoral votes.
We should
Put it
have
on
our
the
own
tape.
show.
We got this.
So
We need our own
let's
show.
do this. We got to quickly get to outrages and kudos. Please keep them tight. What do you have this week?
So this is a delayed outrage or kudo, but this is just to Mayor Hopkins and candidate Ferry. Please keep the campaign above the fray. Let's make it about the issues. And I'll be back to say if it's an outrage or a kudo, depending on how things go.
Wow, you are flexible. You can go either way.
Exactly.
Bob, what do you have?
This is Kudo, and he hates the recognition, but my very good friend George Nee is retiring as president of the AFL-CIO. When I started in the labor movement in 1992, he was already a veteran. He served in every role with the AFL in Rhode Island, executive director, and then secretary-treasurer, and then president. I was lucky enough to work with him, learn from him, see his expertise in all things labor and all things politics at the State House. I absolutely think the world of him. He hates being recognized. He doesn't want a retirement party. So I am using this opportunity to say, on behalf of 80,000 union members in Rhode Island and 1 million Rhode Islanders, thank you, George, for everything you have done for all of us for so many years.
It's like all those people who say, I don't want an obituary, I don't want a funeral, just let me go quietly. So, anyhow, you got the last minute.
Okay. 2 things. First, a recognition of a life well lived in the criminal defense arena. That's Robert Mann passed away. He really was an advocate for indigent criminals and did an excellent job. So I'd like to recognize that. And the second thing is the $53 million green bond, which is nothing green, not clean, not green, industrialization of the ocean. You're killing marine life, you're killing the fishing industry, you're killing tourism. We're the ocean state. We don't want to be the ocean state littered with wind turbines washing up on your shore.
So Bob Mann.
Every week I say
quick
that.
story, Bob Mann. Of course, I covered the Craig Price trial and other ones, and he always came in a disheveled mess, but everybody kind of knew that was who he was. His tie would always flip over, and I was in TV at the time, and I was like, Bob, I'm sorry, I got to do this before we do the interview. I'd flip it and he'd go, it's not going to stay that way. And I'm like, what are you, magic ties that flip around? But it's a big loss. He was
Yes.
He was great. All right, folks, that is all the time we have. We appreciate you joining us, Don. Good to see you. And Sue and Bob. Come back next week. We will have a full analysis. We are heading, as Bob said, 55 days until the election, 7 weeks. We'll see what happens locally as the races begin to gear up. If you don't see us Friday at 7 or Sunday at noon, we archive all of our shows at ripbs.org/lively or wherever you get your favorite podcasts. You can take us along with you. Come back next week as the Lively Experiment continues.
A Lively Experiment is generously underwritten by
Hi, I'm John Hazen-White Jr. For over 30 years, A Lively Experiment has provided insight and analysis of the political issues that face Rhode Islanders. I'm a proud supporter of this great program and Rhode Island PBS.